it is the second that's called Kedoshim. It's the second that's called holy. So it's very telling, because in Judaism, what makes you holy is not how holy you are when you are in Yom Kippur in the temple, how much you could sway and roll your eyes and meditate and be inspired by the songs. It's all wonderful, but that's not the parsha called holy. You want to know what it means to be holy? Oh, it's how you treat your neighbor. It's how you treat the poor. It's how you act in business, how you act in judgment. Oh, that's where holiness is found. So it's fascinating. Two parshas. One discusses what we would conventionally call holiness, Yom Kippur. That's not called holiness. The second, in other words, not classified as holy because it's not the ultimate holiness. The second parsha is really telling us how to deal in day-to-day life. So many commandments, but that's the parsha that is labeled holy, which is telling of how Judaism sees holiness, which I think is fascinating. Just by the names of the parsha itself, we already have a message. So those who want to go home, you can do that. You already have a takeaway. If you want to stay a little more elaboration, you could stick around. Okay, so now what we're going to do, once we have that first introduction, we could jump to the portion, parsha in a nutshell. Let's see if I can read this. So it's Acharei Kedoshim, it's two portions together, combined, as you mentioned. Following the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, God warns against unauthorized entry into the holy. Right? What happened? What happens was that on the day of the inauguration of the temple, two of Aaron's sons, they get so excited, they come running into the temple, but they come in without permission. And that's what they die, and they die. So now God says, after that, God reiterates to Aaron, tell Moshe, tell your brother Aaron, don't come in at any time. You can only come in when it's appropriate. When is it appropriate to come in? Only on Yom Kippur. Once a year, you can come in. Only one person, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, may, but once a year on Yom Kippur, enter the innermost chamber of the sanctuary to offer the sacred ketoret to God, the incense. Maybe we'll talk about the incense and what the power of the incense is, but that's what the high priest did in the Holy of Holies. He offered incense. Another feature of the Day of Atonement service is the casting of lots over two goats to determine which should be offered to God and which should be dispatched to carry off the sins to Israel in the wilderness. Fascinating story. It's a lot of commentary because it's a very uncharacteristic ritual, as we could discuss if we get into it. It almost sounds like paganism, but that the stranger the mitzvah, the more insight lie there. So we can discuss that if we get a chance. The parasha of Acharei also warns against bringing korbanot, animal or meal offerings, anywhere but in the holy temple, forbids the consumption of blood, and details the laws prohibiting incest and other deviant sexual relations, which is the portion of being holy of Acharei. Of Acharei, the first parsha. So happens to be that on Yom Kippur, in the morning of Yom Kippur, we read the first half of the parsha. In the afternoon of Yom Kippur, on Mincha service, we read the second half. Now we go to the parsha called Kedoshim, be holy. The parsha of Kedoshim begins with the statement, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This is followed by dozens of mitzvot, divine commandments, through which the Jew sanctifies him or herself and relates to the holiness of God. These include the prohibition against idolatry, the mitzvah of charity, the principle of equality before the law, Shabbat, sexual morality, honesty in business, honor and awe of one's parents, and the sacredness of life. What do we see here? We see here the first parsha talks about the unique day, the day that we're like angels. We're angelic. We don't eat, we don't drink. Some people dress in white. That's a wonderful thing to do. That's not what's going to make you holy. What makes you holy is how you deal with your parents, how you deal in business, how you deal between people. And that is the beautiful, beautiful idea just by the naming of the parashas. Also in Kedoshim is the dictum which the great sage Rabbi Akiva called a cardinal principle of the Torah, and of which Hillel said, this is the entire Torah, the rest is commentary. Love your fellow as yourself, which is one of the commandments which is easier said than done. And it's how do I love my fellow as myself? And if we, as we discussed in the past, we may mention it again, it's not so simple that it's even possible to love my fellow as myself. So is this just an inspirational statement that you're supposed to put on a bumper sticker or put on your refrigerator? Or is this supposed to be real, which is a very wonderful question. So this is Acharei and Kedoshim in a nutshell. And now once we break out of the nutshell, we could start digging a little deeper. Of course, any comments, questions, or if something you want to talk about or think about specifically, please mention that, and we will try to accommodate if at all possible. In the meantime, we will go to the Torah reading. We'll read the opening verse. Why not? And we'll read an interesting Rashi, because why not? Rashi is a good parable, so we'll read that as well. So we'll read the opening verse. And the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the sons of Aaron, after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they draw near before the Lord and they died. That's a wonderful verse. Problem with this verse is, I don't need to say it, it's superfluous. Why not? Everything in this verse I already know. No, it's not. Right? Look at verse 2. And the Lord spoke to Moses. It says it again. So what do I need? And the Lord spoke to Moses in verse 1, if it says that the Lord said to Moses in verse 2. Okay? After the death of the two sons of Aaron. Yes, obviously it's after the death of the two sons of Aaron. We already read the death of the two sons of Aaron 2 portions ago, when they drew near before the Lord and they died. We know they died. So literally, if you go through and you look at verse 1, the entire verse 1 is superfluous. So that's the question that Rashi is addressing. Now, you already got the answer a little bit from the way they phrased it in the nutshell. But basically, what Rashi is going to say, and he brings a beautiful parable. The problem here is that the fact that the two sons of Aaron came close to God and they died is not something unique to them. Aaron himself would also want to run up and come close to God and die, right? He has that desire. So therefore, God has to reiterate and remind him, don't do it because you may die like the two sons of Aaron died. In other words, the evoking the two sons of Aaron is a sign that is a warning. And if there's a warning, it means the warning is necessary. Why is the warning necessary? Because Aaron has, because naturally Aaron will want to come close to God. So let's read the Rashi, nice Rashi, and we'll see what we can make of this. And the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's two sons. What does this teach us when it specifies after the death of Aaron's two sons? We already know that this happened after the death of Aaron's two sons. So Rashi quotes the Medrash. The Medrash says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah illustrated the answer with a parable of a patient. Very bad translation. It should be a parable of a choleh, of a sick person. And that's important once we get to the Hasidic commentary. So they write patient. It's really a sick patient. Choleh is sick. So the parable is as follows. There's a sick patient who comes to the physician, whom a physician came to visit. That was in the good old days when the physician would come to your house with his little suitcase. Today, you have to go to the physician and you have to, if you can get one on the phone to speak to, is a half a miracle. But in the old days, they came to your house. So Rashi is still living in the old days. The physician comes to visit the sick. So the physician said to him, do not eat cold foods and do not lie down in a cold, damp place. The problem is if someone has a fever, you're very hot. So what do you want to do? You want to run outside. Today, 35 degrees, in the middle of the spring. You want to run outside and you want to drink cold food. The problem is that it's very dangerous to do so. So the doctor tells the patient, don't eat cold food and don't be in a cold, damp place. Okay, how does that work? It doesn't really work. Then another physician visited him and advised him, do not eat cold foods or lie down in a cold, damp place so that you will not die the way so-and-so died. This one warned the patient more effectively than the former. In other words, if the doctor says it's not good for your health, okay, how many times did the doctor say, just eat salad every day and it will be better for your health? We don't listen, or some of us don't listen, right? The doctor said something, so what? But if the doctor says, if you don't do this, you're going to die, all of a sudden, now I'm listening. So therefore, that the Medrash concludes, the scripture says, after the death of Aaron's two sons, Isaac has some comments here, i.e., God effectively said to Aaron, do not enter the holy in a prohibited manner so that you will not die as your sons died. Okay, wonderful parable. What is Rashi really telling us? So when the Rebbe taught this Rashi, the Rebbe said something fascinating. He said the key word of this Rashi is the word that the English mistranslated. The key word of this Rashi is it's a parable for a sick person. In other words, seemingly the parable could have worked just as good with a healthy person, right? I'm a healthy person. I go to the doctor. He says, eat your broccoli. I don't listen. If he says, eat your broccoli, otherwise you'll die. Oh, now I'm listening, right? So why do you have to bring a parable from a sick person if you can bring a parable from a healthy person? Especially when you think about, what is this parable for? The parable is for Aaron. God tells Moshe, speak to Aaron. Aaron should not enter the Holy of Holies unless only on a specific given day. So the question is, if we're talking to Aaron, why do you have to label Aaron as a sick person? Why can't you label Aaron as a nice, healthy person who goes to the gym every day? So the commentary that Eva offered is fascinating. The commentary said, of course, Aaron is a sick person. What kind of sickness? So this is a verse. And in Hebrew, it works in English too. Cholat ava, love sick. Aaron is sick. When somebody loves somebody or something so much, they can't eat, they can't drink, they're distracted, they can't sleep. It's literally like an illness. It's a positive illness, but it's an illness. So what Rashi's point here is that when a God has to tell Aaron, hey, do not go into the Holy of Holies because you may die, what that tells us about, what does that tell us about Aaron's state of mind? So on this, Rashi quotes the Medrash, the state of mind of Aaron is he's chola, he's sick, he's lovesick, he really wants to get close to God. And therefore, God has to say, you cannot go whenever you want. You have to wait, and you have to have a balanced life. You can't get too close. You have to live in the world. But what's interesting here is God doesn't offer to cure Aaron. Jill, we'll get to your question in a second. God doesn't offer to cure Aaron. God doesn't say, it's not good to be lovesick. It's not good. Go get a doctor. Go be healed. No. We need the desire. We need the yearning. But like the Kabbalah says, we have to run and return. Therefore, every day in the morning, we wake up, and if you want to really impact the world, number one, you have to create a love to God. What is a love? A love is a desire to cleave to God. It's a love to come close to God. And that is love sick. And that's why we say the Shema. What do we say when we say the Shema? We cover our eyes and we say nothing else is significant. What is significant? Only the oneness of Hashem. And then we say we should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Right? So we nothing else matters. That's the love sick. But then we have to know we can't hang out in the Holy of Holies. We can't hang out in this space on the whole day. What does God want of us? God wants us to be holy, as in the second aspect of the parsha, which is, could you bring that inspiration down to daily life? And for the extreme experience of holiness, for that you have once a year on Yom Kippur, but that's not the goal. That is just the way to make sure that we remain love sick. You have to express that love. So that's the balance. That's the balance of life. We don't have an easy life. We say, I mentioned this before, but there's a statement in the Ethics of the Fathers. You will live against your will and you die against your will. So what is it? Do I want to live or I want to die? If it says you're born, you live against your will, seems like I want to die. But then it says I die against my will, since it seems like I want to live. So which one is it? So the answer is that I want both. I want to die. My soul wants to expire and come close to God, as did the sons of Aaron. Yet, I don't do that because it's God wants me to live. And if God wants me to live, God has a purpose for me in this world. And that's the tension here. The tension here is to be a spiritual person in this world, you have to have that yearning and returning, that running and returning, which are expressed in both aspects of the parsha. So this is all by way of introduction, the first verse with the first Rashi, and now we could start thinking about which aspect of the parsha we want to discuss. But that is just to get our feet wet.
Rabbi, why do we have the other two parshiot in between?
Well, that's a good question. Why is there a break between the story of the death of Aaron and now God reiterating to Aaron not to go into the Holy of Holies? So that's a good question. I'll give you the Hasidic answer. The Hasidic answer is that just if I remember it properly, I remember the gist, but I don't remember the exact application. The gist is as follows. The gist is that the last two parshas, with all due respect, were very negative parshas. They spoke about the impurity, and specifically impurity of tzarat, but also other forms of impurity. So the last two parashas discuss how to deal with impurity. Okay, so let's just put ourselves in the shoes of those parashas. So the story, we go from the portion of Shemini, which discusses the unbelievable day that they inaugurated the temple, when the divine presence dwells in the temple, revelation of God, an experience of feeling close to God. And that was an unbelievable experience to the extent that the two sons of Aaron cannot control themselves and they run into the Holy of Holies. But certainly Shemini, the eighth parsha, the eighth day, the 3 parshas ago, is intensely spiritual. And then you move from the intensely spiritual parsha to the parsha that discusses how to deal with purity and impurity, which means you're in a space that's not holy. You're in a space of negative, you're in a space that's not wholesome. You're in a space that has negativity. And then the question becomes, those are depressing portions. So if you're Aaron and you start hearing about light, or forget about your fear, every Jew, if you hear about the world and the challenges of the world and the impurity that is embedded within the world, which is in some cases that some impurities are inevitable, then what do you want to do? Then you say, so why do I need to be in the world? Why don't I escape and go to the temple all day long? Why should I remain in an environment where I'm susceptible to impurity? So specifically after reading the last 2 portions, that's actually a motivation to say, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with the impurity. What do I want to do? I want to do what King David says. All I want. King David, beautiful verse, when King David ran away from the son, from Jerusalem, because he was running away from the son who rebelled against him, Avshalom. He says this verse and he says, there's only one thing I ask of God. I only have one desire in this world. He says, Shifti bevet Hashem kol yemei chayai. I want to sit in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Very beautiful verse. King David didn't do that, but that's the desire. That's what you want. So specifically after the last 2 portions where we discuss the concept of the impurity, that would be a motivation to say, okay, I'm running to the temple. I don't want to deal with the world. The world is a place susceptible to impurity. And that's why God has to say, it's a wonderful desire. The fact that you're lovesick is wonderful, and please remain lovesick. However, it's wonderful for once a year. The actual implementation of your desire to be angelic, to sit in the house of the Lord all the days of your life. There's one day of year where you can express that love. But having that desire will actually keep you in check. In other words, keep you connected to spirituality, so that when you are in the world, in the second parsha that we discuss, you will be able to sanctify it and be holy. If you did not have that love desire, the lovesick desire to cleave to God, you would not be able to implement the holiness in your daily life. In short, why is it written after the 2 parshas? To tell you that even after the 2 parshas, and when you face the negativity of the world, still, nevertheless, you say, I want to escape, but I don't escape. That is the Hasidic answer, if I remember correctly.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I know it's in the middle of the spring now. Well, not today, but in general. In other words, it doesn't feel like the spring. But we're discussing Yom Kippur. So why are we discussing Yom Kippur in the middle of the spring? Because this is very important to talk about it, because hi, Isaac. It was very important to talk about it because this was when it was relevant. This is when Aaron really wants to connect to God, and God has to say, now is not the time. Wait 6 months. You come to meet me in 6 months in the Holy of Holies. But the Torah gives us a great description of exactly what happens on the Holy of Holies, on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies. And there is a fascinating discussion, which I may have discussed in the past, but it's always good to reiterate. I think it's a nice thing because it's a general idea that in the times of the Second Temple, there became a great dispute within the Jewish people, as is known. And there was a dispute between what they called the Perushim, the Pharisees, that what we call today the traditional Judaism, the rabbis, and the Tzedukim, the Sadducees, which is a sect. At some point, they were a very powerful sect, and sometimes they were even the majority of people who rejected the oral Torah. And because they rejected the oral Torah, they said, we're not interested in the rabbinic interpretation. All we want is the actual, tell us what God wants. Forget about what the rabbis want. And it sounds very good because they want to come close to God, but because they only want here, they don't want human intervention. But it leads to a lot of problems because a lot of people think that the traditional Jews take the Bible literally, but the truth of the matter is nothing could be further from the truth. That almost every verse in the Bible is reinterpreted. You just want some famous examples. You take examples such as an eye for an eye. The Torah says that if you harm somebody, you poke out their eye. You poke out their eye, and the rabbis say, no, it means monetary compensation. So there's so many examples. Every verse could be. But one of the big disputes in the Second Temple, there's one about the accounting of the Omer, which is another story. Even though we're counting the Omer now, we won't talk about it. It's not this week's Parsha. Maybe in 2 weeks, we'll talk about it. Next week and more. But then there is a big dispute about Yom Kippur. Now, the problem here is that there were closet Sadducees. Fascinating. Yeah, that's Abba. There were closet Sadducees. What do I mean? Let's say, so there was a dispute, there was amongst the Jewish people, there was throughout this period of the Second Temple, which lasted 420 years, there's ups and downs of who controlled the temple. Sometimes the rabbis controlled the temple, sometimes the Sadducees controlled the temple. When the rabbis controlled the temple, they didn't know the high priest. Is he going to be a Sadducee? Is he a closet Sadducee? Is he going to do the service the way the Sadducees interpret it or the way the rabbis interpret it? The problem is that we can't watch him because there's a verse in this week's parsha, which I'll show you in a moment, that says nobody should be in the holy when the high priest enters to atone in the holy. In other words, no one's allowed into the sanctuary. He's alone. No hidden cameras, no people. So now, if you're the rabbis and you're traumatized by the Sadducees, what do? How do we know that the high priest that's going to enter the Holy of Holies is actually going to perform the service the way the rabbis want him to, not the way the Sadducees want him to? And I'll show you what the Sadducees want to do and what the rabbis want to do, and then we'll think about what's the deeper significance of all of this, which is absolutely fascinating. So first thing, we have to just read what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, so what do the rabbis do? So the rabbis, this is unbelievable. They had the high priest. They thought he's a righteous man, but maybe he's a closet Sadducee. So what they would do is, before Yom Kippur, they would make the high priest swear that he's going to do the service according to the interpretation of the rabbis and not according to the interpretation of the Sadducees. And then there's a beautiful description in the Talmud. The description said in the Mishnah, the Mishnah says, after they would make the high priest swear, the high priest would cry and they would cry. The rabbis would cry. Why is everybody crying? The high priest would cry because they accused him of being a Sadducee. And the rabbis would cry because they had to suspect someone of being a closet Sadducee. They have no choice. So it was a terrible experience. They had to take a good guy, a high priest that was a righteous person, but they had to make him take an oath. I'm not a Sadducee. Now, so they see. All I'm trying to say, this was a big deal. It was traumatic, and it was traumatic, and seemingly it's a very minor point of law. But part of the fun here is that there's no such thing as a minor part of law. Every law has an idea behind it, and this became such a big dispute because there's a major idea behind this, and that's what we're going to try to show in the next few minutes. Try to show the verse, show how the Sadducees read it, how the rabbis read it, and then the deeper dimension, what is the deeper significance? And if we really get lucky, what does it mean in our life? Okay, that's already the hard part. Okay, but to do all this, we're going to have to share the verses. Okay, fine.
Rabbi, did they cry 100% of the time, or does it depend?
I don't know. I'll tell you what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says they would make the Yuma. There's a whole tractate of the Mishnah and the Talmud that discusses the order of Yom Kippur. It begins 7 days before Yom Kippur. They took the high priest away from his home to his office in the temple to prepare. And a part of the preparation is they would make him take an oath. And the Mishnah says, just a matter of fact, he would move aside and cry. They would move inside and cry. Everybody's crying. Wonderful. But it just shows that this was important. This was important. They did this, and it was important to them. Even if they had only one, what is the chances that this high priest is a closet Sadducee? We're not taking any chances. This is too important because the service of Yom Kippur brings atonement for the entire Jewish people for the entire year. So we're not. How are we going to take any chances? We can't take a chance.
And there were no cases described where the high priest
was there. We don't know.
Indeed. Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry?
what if he was indeed a closet Sadducees?
Oh,
Was he tried?
The Sadducees would not take an oath. The
Uh-huh.
Sadducees wouldn't lie.
But
They wouldn't lie.
it's risky.
No, they wouldn't lie because they believed in the oral Torah and the written Torah. They
Right.
wouldn't lie. So when sometimes the Sadducees controlled the temple, the rabbis had no choice. But if the rabbis control the temple and you're a Sadducee and you swear, you're going to keep your word because that's in the Ten Commandments. It's the third commandment. There's no monkey business with the Sadducees. They're very serious people.
And if you lie, you can also die during the service because you're not the righteous person.
I guess so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where am I going? Where am I looking all over the place? It's right here. Okay. Did she say anything? Okay, let's read the verse 2. And the Lord said to Moses, speak to your brother Aaron that he should not come at all times into the holy within the dividing curtain, meaning what we call the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber where the ark was. Because there's holy, but then there's the holy that's beyond the curtain. Because in the temple, there was a curtain dividing the holy and the Holy of Holies. So you can't go, Aaron could not just come in beyond the curtain at any time. In front of the cover that is upon the ark. In other words, you can't go into where the ark is, or the covering on the ark, which is the kaporet. V'lo yamut, so that he should not die. And here is the key phrase. For I appear over the cover in a cloud. In other words, God is saying, you can't come into the Holy of Holies. It's my room. It's my bedroom. I'm there in my intimate form. So I'm present over the ark in a cloud. So you cannot come in. That is the simple meaning of the verse. However, the rabbis read it, but the other way of reading it is as follows. For I appear, for ki ba'anan eira'eh. Eira'eh is future tense. They're translating it here as present, but present and future are interchangeable in some cases because what is present? Present is the continuous present becomes future. In any case, this could be read, for I will appear over the ark in a cloud. Ki ba'anan, because with the cloud, I will appear on the kaporet. Now, what do I mean with the cloud? When we think of a cloud, we just think of a cloud. But if you look all the way down, and what are the actual high priests? What do the high priests actually do within the Holy of Holies? What he did within the Holy of Holies is he took a pan of coals, put the coals on the floor, put the pan on the floor. He took the incense, which is 11 spices. We could talk about that if we have time. And he puts the spices on the coals and smoke. The whole room becomes, and smoke emerges. The whole room gets filled with smoke, and the smoke is the pleasing aroma. It's a ketoret, it's a spice, it's perfume. But what's interesting is that the Torah, as you will see, the Torah refers to the cloud of smoke as a cloud. So it doesn't say the smoke of the ketoret; it says the cloud of the ketoret. So let's look at verse 12 and 13. This is what the high priest did within the Holy of Holies. And he shall take a pan full of burning coals from upon the altar, from before the Lord, and both hands full of fine incense, and bring it in within the dividing curtain. So he's in the Holy of Holies. What does he do? He's got a pan. In one hand, he has a pan of burning coals, and the other hand, he has both hands. Actually, no, I'm wrong. All year, he did one hand. This was a very hard service. He had both hands full of incense, but he also had a pan of coals. So how do you have a pan of coals? But what do? You only have two hands. You don't have three hands. So what's interesting, what he did was he had a pan of coals, but the pan, he would actually had a handle, and the handle actually would hold it with his mouth, in his mouth. And that's how he would enter with two hands full. In any case, so what does he do? The 13, and he shall place the incense upon the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud of the incense shall envelop the ark the ark cover that is over the tablets of testimony, so that he shall not die. In other words, he comes inside, he takes the incense, he puts the incense on the coals, the whole, and then you have a cloud of smoke. It doesn't say smoke, because the cloud of incense would fill the entire room, lest he die. In other words, you can't do it. If he doesn't do this properly, he will die. So here, going back to verse, so that was in verse 13. Verse 13 says, the cloud of the incense shall envelop the ark. What does verse 10 say? What does verse 2 say? Verse 2 says, for I appear over the ark cover in a cloud. Which cloud? When you put in the incense and it creates the cloud, that's when God appears. That's a second interpretation of Rashi. I'll show you Rashi right here. The second interpretation of Rashi. Medrash, however, interpreted as the rabbis, however, interpreted it as follows: he shall not come except with the cloud of the incense of Yom Kippur. So when God says, I appear over the ark cover in a cloud, what cloud are we talking about? We're talking about the cloud of the incense. And I just showed you verse 13, where the Torah itself refers to the incense as a cloud. Okay, here is the big dispute. You ready? This is the dispute that was so important that we're going to make people cry, and the rabbis are going to cry, and everybody's going to cry, because this is too important to leave to chance, and to leave to the 1% chance or a small percent chance that we're dealing here, not with a high priest that's loyal to the rabbis, but a closet Sadducee that's going to run his own thing and run amok and ruin the whole service and destroy the atonement for the entire Jewish people. Okay, what's at stake here? You see, the Jews are fighting already. What's at stake here? So what are they fighting about already? Not if they should bow to the idol, God forbid. What are they fighting? So here's the disagreement. You ready? The disagreement is as follows. The Sadducees say you have to put the incense on the fire outside the Holy of Holies, in the outer chamber. You create the smoke, and then you come into the Holy of Holies when the thing is already smoking. In other words, once the smoke has already been produced, then, once the cloud has already been produced, then you go into the Holy of Holies. That's the Sadducees. The rabbis say, oh no, God forbid, that would be a disaster. What we have to do is, you have to go into the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies, you have to put the incense on the coals and create the cloud while you're in the Holy of Holies. And this is so important that if you don't do this, you're going to ruin the whole service, and then we're going to have to, and it will be terrible. And therefore, we're going to make you, every high priest, take an oath that he's not a closet Sadducee, and he's going to do exactly what we say. God forbid, do not put those incense on the coals outside in the holy before you get into the Holy of Holies, but you should only put it into the Holy of Holies. That is the big dispute, and that was the historic issue here, and this was very important. Now, of course, the question is, why is this important? And why did this become this big issue of dispute between the rabbis and the Sadducees? And of course, the obvious question is, what does it have to do with us? So in the meantime, if anybody wants to comment or anything technical or anything interesting, but this is, just make sure you understand the dispute here. We have to create a pillar of smoke before, a cloud of smoke before we enter the Holy of Holies. That's clear. Everybody agrees. The only big dispute here between the Sadducees is where is this happening? The Sadducees say you put the incense on the fire, producing the cloud before you enter the Holy of Holies, and when that thing is pillaring with smoke, then you enter the Holy of Holies. The rabbis say no. You go into the Holy of Holies, you put the pan on the floor, and then you put the incense on the fire. Why? Why is this important? What does this represent? Is a good question. Unfortunately, the Mishnah doesn't say it. So I'm telling you what contemporary commentaries are saying, but it's too interesting to ignore. So unless somebody, maybe I'll just get you started, get you thinking, and then if you come up with another interpretation, we'll repeat it next year, same time, same place.
Rabbi, I have a question. It's not interpretation, it's a technical question. If the Kohen will start the smoke before, would they see it because it's outside? They will see.
No. It's out. It's still inside. It's in the holy, not in the Holy of Holies. It's in the outer chamber, not in the inner chamber, but it's still in the house. Nobody can come in. It says anybody should not be in the Kodesh. They would have to evacuate the entire temple, both the outer chamber and inner chamber. so nobody could see. You could be in there, you could do whatever you want. You could destroy the place. You could even put the incense on the fire in the outside chamber. Oh my God, terrible.
And nobody will find out.
Nobody will find it. Only God knows. So therefore, you have to make them take an oath. So this is, if it wouldn't be so, it's actually funny. It's like, what are these people? What are we fighting about? Why is this important? I mean, the Jews, we understand that they need something to do with their time, but to fight about this sounds completely trivial. So obviously it's important because the Torah says and the rabbinic tradition says how to do it. But we also want to say maybe there's some symbolism here. Maybe there's symbolism here. I mean, what is the symbolism? And what we can try to do is figure out why this becomes such an important point of dispute between maybe this symbolism actually, maybe this symbolism, maybe this symbolism actually captures the heart of the dispute between the Sadducees and the rabbis. And that's why if you're a Sadducee, you will have actually an incentive to get those rabbis and do it your way. Okay, so what does this represent? So what is the cloud? The cloud is produced by the smoke. No coloring on walls. No coloring on walls. Here, תיקח דף, תרשום על הדף. הנה, יש לך דף פה. What does the cloud represent? The cloud represents the divine presence, the presence of Shekhinah, the presence of God. Why the cloud? So we can give you different theories, but it's clear that, for example, when God descends on Mount Sinai, he descends with a cloud. When every time God comes to speak to Moses in the tent of meeting, it says that the cloud appears. God appears in a cloud, which is fascinating because in the Kabbalah, for example, we think of God as light or in stuff, the infinite light of God. But in the Bible, God is always in a cloud and even a thick cloud of smoke. You can't really see it. And after the divine presence rests on the Shekhinah, the final verses of the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus, the verse says, Moses could not enter the temple because of the thick cloud that rested upon it. So the cloud represents the presence of God. Why so? Because what we're trying to say here is we cannot grasp the essence of God. Of course, the Kabbalists are right. There's light of God. Light is that little bit of God that you can perceive and you could understand. But the essence of God is beyond human comprehension. So the smoke represents the distance. It's not a symbol of God. It's a symbol of our inability to understand God or to perceive and understand the essence of God. So that's about the smoke. Now the question becomes, so if the smoke is a metaphor for the divine presence, now the smoke in the Holy of Holies represents the divine presence in the Holy of Holies. Now the question is, how do you bring the divine presence into the temple? How do you bring the divine presence into the Jewish people? How do you bring the divine presence into your life? Here is a big dispute between the Sadducees and the rabbis. The rabbis say, let's start with the Sadducees. Okay, let's start with the rabbis. Oh, who should I start with? I don't know. One opinion is we cannot bring God into our life. Only God could decide where he's going to show up. That's the Sadducees. We're not interested in oral interpretation, in the interpretation of the rabbis, rabbinic interpretation, because we want to connect to God. And since we want to connect to God, the only way we can connect to God is on God's own terms. Only God could tell us what to do, how to get him to come into our life. What do the rabbis say? The rabbis say, no, that's not the way it works. The rabbis say something radical for a religion. I don't think there's any religion that could say anything like this. The rabbis say, you know how you bring, you know how, if you ask God, how do you bring God into our life? What is God going to say? God's going to say, ask the people. Because that's the whole idea of the oral Torah. The oral Torah is that the human beings interpret the divine law. So the human beings have an integral part of bringing God into this world. Because whether or not this is a mitzvah, whether or not this is kosher, whether or not this is an activity which has the power to draw down the infinite light of God is determined not only on God, also on God. It's also based on the Torah, but it's also determined on human interpretation. So the big dispute between the Sadducees and the rabbis is, how do you bring God into this world? How do you bring God into your life? Is it only in God's power to do so, and our job is just to listen and do what God says? Or is it human action, human interpretation, human involvement? Okay, now let's go back to the story of Yom Kippur. What happens on Yom Kippur? Say the Sadducees, when you're in the Holy of Holies, with the smoke, representing the divine temple, they don't want any human action. They don't want the high priest producing the cloud. The cloud represents the divine presence dwelling. No, the human being does not produce the cloud. So of course you have to produce the cloud. Do that outside. When you come into the Holy of Holies, which represents I'm before God, we're in the holiest place. God is here with us. The room is full of the cloud of God. Okay, who produced this cloud of God? I don't know, but there's no human action within this holy space. What do the rabbis say? No, no, no. Who's going to bring God into the Holy of Holies? It's going to be the high priest, which represents the people. And the high priest, through his actions and which represents the human intervention and human participation in this relationship, that is what's going to bring the divine presence into the temple. That's what's going to bring about the atonement. And that's why I hope this at least gives some light that this dispute here is not a trivial matter of law, because there is no such thing as a trivial matter of law. Even what looks like a trivial matter of law is not. There's a deep philosophical debate here. Is the human action critical to bring the human participation critical to bringing God into your life? Sadducees say no. We want no human action in the Holy of Holies. God says, and the rabbis say, of course, yes. The whole idea of the oral Torah is human interpretation. The whole idea of the Torah is the relationship between God and the Jewish people. Human action is very much needed, even in the Holy of Holies, to bring about the relationship between God and the Jewish people and the presence and God's presence in the Holy of Holies. So that's idea number one. We'll say another idea, even though I want to go off a little early today. I'm unfortunately I have to run off a little early today, but one more idea we'll talk about, and we're not going to have time to the other parsha. Just one more idea about, we're already in the Holy of Holies, pun intended. We're in the Holy of Holies. So let's talk about the incense, another angle of the incense for a moment. But so far, I just want to make sure everybody understands the technicality of what we're saying and how this works, and how, according to the Sadducees, when you enter the Holy of Holies, the holiest space, there's no human action, because you put the incense on the coals outside. And when you entered the place which represents the divine presence, there's no action. And the rabbis say, no, you enter the Holy of Holies. You put the pan on the earth. You put the incense on the pan. And you, the human being, is the one who causes the room to be filled up with smoke. The human being is the one who causes the divine presence to be filled, to fill up the room. And of course, the ramification in our life is some people wait and see. We want God to make us holy. We want God to inspire us. We want God to uplift us. Right? I wake up in the morning, the sun is shining, I'm happy. If it's cloudy, okay, so I say, well, let's wait for tomorrow, right? God tomorrow will send the sun. In other words, everybody has things in their life that we say, God will do for me, and then I'll change, then I'll improve, then I'll become close to God, then I'll be a better person. But what the symbolism of the high priest here is, you want to bring God into your life, don't wait for God to do something, because God is waiting for the human action. It's a completely different perspective on the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So that is point number one. Now we go to point number two. What is this incense, and why are they so powerful? And why is it that we don't have time to take a tour throughout all the stories of the incense throughout the Torah? But the incense are very powerful in the Torah. They're the thing that, of all the offerings in the temple, they are the things that would, as the Torah says, calm down the wrath of God. Whenever there's a plague, when there was a plague after Korach, people are dying, 24,000 people die. Moses tells Aaron, you got to stop the plague. You know what you do? Go take the incense and bring the incense amongst the people dying, and the plague will stop. And the incense was seen as something, the most powerful service in the temple, to the degree that when you have to go into the Holy of Holies and you have to get God to forgive the Jewish people, even though the entire book of Leviticus is all about sacrifices and offerings and blood, and we talked about so many metaphors and so many meditations about what their offerings represent, none of that. In the Holy of Holies, it's just the incense. What is it about the incense that actually would bring about the atonement? So there's all kinds of interpretations. I'm going to give you two extremes. I'll give you Maimonides, which is totally rational, and then I'll give you the Hasidic interpretation. Maimonides got into trouble for writing what he wrote. He got a lot of people upset, as he did many things in the Guide to the Perplexed, which was trying to explain the Torah in terms of people who, for people who were engrossed in philosophy, in Greek philosophy. So Maimonides is talking to them, and he explains the Torah in those terms. And some people believe that Maimonides himself believed that. Others say, no, he didn't really believe that. He just said this to explain the Torah to those people. But in any case, here is a beautiful example. Says Maimonides in the guide. Why do we bring the incense into the Holy of Holies? You know why? It says the glory of God. It says the glory of God is going to rest the glory of God is going to rest in the Holy of Holies. You know why we have incense in the Holy of Holies? Should I tell you why? Because the temple, I know we have this romantic view of what the temple looked like. The temple stunk. The temple is basically a temple is a slaughterhouse. They're burning fats, they're burning animals, there's blood everywhere, the place stinks. So in the Holy of Holies, God says, you know what, I don't like the smell. Bring in some good smell, bring in the incense, and it will smell good. Then you forget about the mess that's going on outside with the slaughterhouse. That's what Maimonides says. You can imagine that got him into trouble. I'm going to give now the Hasidic interpretation, and then I'm going to explain how the Hasidic interpretation reinterprets Maimonides. So it's not a contradiction. Maimonides himself is multi-layered. So the problem with Maimonides is he says the whole purpose is because there's a bad smell. Well, that's not what the Torah sounds like. It sounds like the Torah that smell of the incense actually appeases God. When Moses discusses the last day of his life, when he praises the tribe of Levi, and he talks about the tribe of Levi, which is the tribe that serves in the temple, and the priests are members of the tribe of Levi. So when Moshe wants to praise the tribe of Levi, he doesn't say they offer offerings. He says, Yasimuk Torah ba'pecha, they put incense in your nostrils. In other words, this is something that's considered pleasurable to God. And if we don't have time to go through all of this, but in the Talmud, the Talmud says something fascinating. It says that why is the incense the most sublime and the most holy service? Because of all the five senses of a person, smell is the most spiritual. And therefore, according to the Talmud, smell is the only one of the five senses that the soul enjoys. The soul doesn't enjoy food. The soul doesn't enjoy, certainly not touch. Even seeing and hearing, the soul doesn't necessarily connect to. But smell is pleasure for the soul. We don't have time to get into this right now. But within the spiritual, within the person, even the science is getting onto this now. That smell reaches the deepest part of a person. It reaches the emotion. It reaches where the memory is in the brain. And therefore, maybe food gives you pleasure. But when you smell something that reminds you of your grandmother, that gives you nostalgia. Not the taste, the smell. And smell is very powerful. It goes very deep within the person. But what does this have to do with God? So there's many commentaries. One commentary from the Hasidic movement is as follows. What is smell? Before we get to the smell, what are the incense? The incense, first of all, the Torah mentions four species of 4 ingredients, but the rabbis say there's not 4, there's 11. The Torah only mentions 4 of the 11. First of all, what is the number 11? The number 11 is not a Jewish number. In Judaism, there's 10. We have 7 is important, 8 is important, 10 is important, 11 is like what 11? We have 10 utterances, we have 10 commandments. It takes 10 people for a minyan, 10 men for a minyan. Number 10 is a complete number. What does this mean that you need 11 ingredients in the incense? That's one question. Next question. If you look at the incense, not all of them smell very good. The one of them was a chelbina. We're not sure exactly what it is. There are some theories, but in any case, chelbina, which is almost 25% of the mixture, has a terrible smell. Only when you put all the species together, then it becomes a good aroma. So what the Kabbalists say is as follows, the Hasidic masters say as follows. You know what incense represents? So let's start with 11. What is 11? 11 is not holy. 10 is holy. There are 10 sphirot, 10 divine attributes, the 10 divine energies. But then there's 11. Holiness, unholiness, the klipa always goes by the number 11. Why? Because there's the 10 dimensions of the klipa. But then there's the divine spark. But in holiness, the divine spark merges within the 10 attributes of the created being, of the holy energy. So the divine energy is not counted as its own number, because the divine energy is one and the same, merges within the holy energies. When it comes to unholiness, there's the 10 sphirot of the klipa, the 10 dimensions of the unholiness, and then there's the 11th. The 11th is the divine energy that creates it. But it creates it, it hovers above it. It doesn't merge with it because it's unholy. So 11 represents that the holiness, that the divine energy which creates everything, including holiness, does not merge with the holiness because it's unholy. So 11 is unholiness. So what are we doing? We're taking unholiness and going into the Holy of Holies and affecting purity. How does this work? So the idea here is as follows. The idea here is that what brings the great atonement to God is the metaphor of the incense. What is the metaphor of the incense? In short, it's the unexpected. What we're doing is we're taking a negative experience and transforming it to positive. That's really what the Torah represents. We're taking number 11, which is unholiness. We're taking spices which by themselves do not produce any aroma, and we're spinning them in a way that, creating them in a way that they will now create a positive aroma. That represents in Hasidic thought the idea of itapcha transformation, transforming the negative to the positive. That is what creates atonement, because that's what God loves more than anything else. Why? Because that's why God created the world. If God is looking for holiness that he has in heaven, he doesn't have to create the world. What God gets out of this world is the experience of negativity and transforming the negativity to good. And who could transform the negativity to good? Not God. God doesn't have any negativity. Not the angels. They don't either have any negativity. The only person that could transform the negativity to good is the human being. And that is the metaphor of this incense. The incense touch God so deeply, and they create the atonement because they represent for God why he created the world to begin with. And that is up to everybody. Anybody can do this. Anybody could take the negative experience and transform that negative experience to something positive. And when I do so, when I grow from that experience, what I'm really doing is I'm offering God incense. And when I offer God that incense, that creates and reestablishes the relationship with God. So there's a lot more to say, but it's 10:58 and Richard has a question. So we'll stop here for now, and we'll continue for many long years with good health. God will bless us all with good health and long life, and with a lot of time and peace of mind, so we'll be able to continue studying the Holy Torah and implementing it in our life. And most importantly, not remaining in the first parsha like we did on this call, but now, after you finish the first parsha, go to the second parsha, go be holy. Be holy means go out into the world and there live a holy life.
Amen, amen, amen.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, just the one add a point from that dovetails exactly what you've been saying about taking a negative and turning it into a positive. The essence of comedy is
Go ahead.
The essence of comedy, of humor, is you take a negative and turn it into a positive because you're eliciting a laugh from the audience. You're making something humorous, pleasurable out of a negative experience. And that's the kernel, the essence of a comedy is all about.
Okay, so you're the expert on comedy. On comedy, I'm not gonna dispute. But I'll just tell you what the Kabbalists think about comedy. They're not disagreeing with you. Another dimension. The Kabbalists think that the essence of comedy is the unexpected.
Right.
When you say something, when you do something unexpected, that is comedy. Now, the whole idea of transformation in all of the spiritual worlds, there's nothing unexpected. It's all very good. There's holy, there's unholiness, everything is expected, everything's accounted for. Only in this world, if you could take something negative and make that positive, that is unexpected. That is what God would call, what God would bring God pleasure and bring God joy and bring God laughter. The unexpected is what's, and the unexpected is when a person transcends the self.
Also, just as a subtext to what we're just talking about, there's a joke. I don't know the whole joke, but it goes like this. There's a bunch of people up in heaven, and they say to God, who's coming up here? Who do you allow in heaven? And God says, see those people down there making people laugh? They're the ones that want up in heaven.
That's in the Talmud. That's serious. Yeah.
That is okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll tell you a joke. It's not serious. The kid, I heard it today, so I'll say it today. It's got nothing to do with anything, but it's unexpected, so I'll say it. Okay, the joke is like this. The kid gets home, sent home in Russia, and she has an assignment. And the assignment is, write an essay of why you love Mother Russia. Okay, easy, no problem. It's during communism. So she says, easy, I'm just going to go home and find out why people love Mother Russia. She comes home and says, Dad, why do you love Russia? She says, I don't. Okay, it's getting harder. She goes to Mom, why do you love Mother Russia? She says, I don't. Goes to his sister, why do you love Mother Russia? I don't. Okay, so she takes out a pen and he says, I love Mother Russia because nobody else does. That was how she transformed the negative into the positive.
That's it. You say the unexpected, like you said. You say the unexpected. And that's what it does. You're taking a negative, making it a positive. And that's just, in essence, what you've been talking about this morning.
Yes, and that's why in the prayer every morning we mention all 11 incense. Why are we mentioning the recipe for the incense? Just like we mentioned all the offerings. One of the things we do, we mention all the recipe, because by speaking, we create, by saying the words, we create the same spiritual energy that the sages offered, that the high priest offered, that the priests offered in the temple. But in our life, what does it mean to offer the incense? The offer the incense is when you take the 11 is unholy, and you take that experience, any negative experience, any difficult experience, and you transform that to something positive. You learn from that. You grow from that. And then something would and then you create that incense. I'll tell you an unbelievable story that I heard this week. I don't know if it's an unbelievable story. I'll tell you a story I heard this week. You tell me if it's unbelievable. A little strange, but I'll tell you the story. So I'm told, I wasn't there, but I'm told that in Borough Park in Brooklyn, there's this beautiful synagogue, and they have a special room. And in this synagogue, they have tea from every part of the world. And the idea is you come to shul and you sit down and you have a tea and you relax. And after you relax, you can go pray. And this is the way it is for many, many years. What's the story behind the synagogue? The story behind the synagogue is as follows. This is the story I've been told. I don't know if it's true. The story I've been told is as follows. The story is that there's this gentleman who's dating a girl, and he's a little bit nervous because he's nervous. And all of a sudden, he looks at his watch. The sun is setting. He's got to daven mincha. He's got to daven the afternoon prayer. But he's on a date. He doesn't know how. Maybe he's not polite. So he gets up and he does a very quick prayer. Problem for him is that this girl was a very pious girl, and she says, "I'm not marrying a guy who just prays so quickly." Right? He was praying quickly to get back to her, but she's like, "I'm not marrying this guy." And she tells him, "Listen, you're a nice guy. I love you. You're a nice guy. You're a good guy, but you're not for me." He says, "Why not? I'm a good guy." He says, "Yeah, but I can't marry someone who prays like that." He was so shaken by the experience, and he realized that I have to strengthen my prayer. Not only have to strengthen my prayer, but I have to strengthen other people's prayers. So eventually he made a couple of dollars. He raised money. He built a synagogue, and he says, in this synagogue, everyone's going to pray like a mensch. And that means that the way we're going to pray is before we pray, we're going to calm down and drink tea. And that's what happened for decades. One day he's walking down the street and he sees a sign and he sees that someone just passed away. They're announcing the Shiva details. Who's the someone? That's the woman he remembers. That's the woman he dated. Calls the family. He says, "Do me a favor. When the funeral procession passes, let it pass by the shul. This shul." So that's what happens. They pass the shul. He opens up the doors and he says, "I have a story to tell you." And he tells everybody the story. And he says, all the decades of prayer that happened because in this synagogue, and everyone could pray in peace and with comfort. All this is in the merit of that girl who told me she's not going to marry me because I daven mincha too fast. So for this guy, that was the way he offered the Torah. He took a negative experience and he created some good things out of it. Is it good that they got married or not? I don't know. This is commentary. The rest you can decide. But I'm just repeating the story I heard. Take it or leave it. Okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for joining, and we should meet each other in good health. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Be well. Bye-bye.